is Corey, and welcome to another Cosmic Summer program. This evening we are doing a Q&A panel about LGBT representation in comics and fiction books. Books. I guess, I don't know. I said that weird, but yeah, again, I'm joined by Ryan La Sala. He is a young adult author, and Cait May. She is an illustrator and comic creator. You guys like to say a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. So hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Ryan La Sala. I write young adult novels. You would know me from either my first book, Reverie, came out back in 2019. It's a young queer kid in Connecticut battling a drag queen sorceress who is trying to destroy Connecticut, you know, as one does when they are a drag queen sorceress. And then my second book came out earlier this year. It's called Bedazzled, and this is my custom. I actually did this bedazzling myself. This is about two ex-boyfriends in a, they're basically paired against one another in an arts and crafts like cosplay competition at like a Comic-Con type setting. And they have to like reconcile their like really bad breakup in order to achieve their own personal goals and, you know, self-fulfillment at a, during a cosplay pageant basically. So it's about arts and crafts and stuff like that. But yeah, so I'm so happy to be talking about nerdy stuff. I'm excited to be here.
And hi, I'm Cait May. I am an author illustrator. Currently, my first graphic novel will be coming out on October 26th. It's called Another Kind. It's about 6 young cryptids going on an adventure and getting chased all over the United States by the government and maybe something else. And of course, we have queer themes and queer characters. And I am currently working on title 2 for graphic novel number 2. It is currently completely work in progress, but we're very excited to have the first book released in October. And the other author is my partner, Trevor Bream.
Cool.
That is exciting for you guys. So I guess I'll start my first question. How long have you guys been creating content, I guess, is sort of a blank away, like whether writing or illustrating? How long have you guys been doing that?
Creating content, just like creating since before I can remember. Professionally, I think I had some of my first clients when I was 16.
Wow.
So a while.
Whoa. What were you doing at 16? I'm so curious.
I was doing character design work.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Yeah, freelance character design.
That is cool.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
And poster illustration.
Oh, really? Do you ever look at your stuff from like that era and just like marvel at like, wow, I was 16 and doing like such cool stuff? Or do you cringe?
Well, I think it's from any like visual artist perspective that when you see your stuff that's like many years old, you're like, oh God, I had no idea what I was doing. I do think that it's cool that I was working at that age. But if I look back at that stuff, I'm like, I want to redraw everything. Like, put it in a box, don't think about it.
Sure, I feel that too. Similarly, I started writing from a really young age. I was such a little liar as a kid. And so most of the stories that like I probably should have been writing down, I was actually like acting out and like convincing my classmates that I was like Jean Grey from X-Men, or that I could turn into Sailor Moon at a moment's notice, and that my pens are magical. Like, that's not creating content, but it is a form of storytelling that was like very like visceral and lived for me. And I've always been, it was like, you know, I mean, entertainment, starting cults in middle school, you decide how to describe it, but I have been telling stories and tricking people into believing them for a really long time. But the first like thing I started to really like work on was actually back in high school. I was reading all the things that people were handing me for young adults, for teens, and I like remember marveling at how absent queer people were in things like The Hunger Games and Twilight. And I always say this, but like I couldn't believe that Twilight was a book about boys that literally sparkled like glitter, like bedazzled boys, and then it kissed one another. I just like couldn't believe it. Like that's so unrealistic. And so I started writing like my own book because I was like a spiteful little child. And that book actually like that became Reverie. Like that book 10 years later became my like first published novel, which is super cool. So I've written other things, or I started other things as like a kid, but truly like the project that I started as like a little kid became like the thing that got me my big break, which is nice.
Cool. So I think you briefly mentioned it, but like, what were some of your earliest nerdy experiences or nerdy interests?
Oh man,
I
I
said,
was
shall we count the ways?
yeah, truly. I mean, oh, so I'm 30 years old. So I think if I like dial it back to like when I was a kid, I think like I mean anything like I loved cartoons, but like loved cartoons, like well past the point when most people like outgrew cartoons. And this is before the era of like Family Guy or sort of like Rick and Morty, where like adult cartoons were really as popular. Like I remember having this voracious appetite for like anything like narrative and like illustrated. And so the things like my earliest loves were it was Toonami. It was like Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z and Gundam
Tsunami.
Wing. Yeah, I loved Toonami. And I was lucky enough to have like older cousins that would like, give me like VHS tapes of like anime from Japan with like subtitle, really poor subtitles of just like cool stuff. Because anime had a much wider range, right? It wasn't just for kids. And so I remember all of that stuff being like probably the like primordial foundation of a lot of my like geekery personally.
I think we actually have a very similar experience because
Yeah.
cartoons is what got me into drawing. And I was like obsessed with any kind of animation, be it, Disney, Don Bluth, DreamWorks, anything under
Yeah.
the sun, as well as, Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network and all that jazz.
Yeah.
But my brother is 10 years older than me. So I'm the 90s kid and he is the 80s kid. So I got all of this 80s influence. So, I'd have my Barbie fighting with my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles all the time because they were
Hmm.
hand-me-downs from my brother.
Yeah.
And then one of the biggest influences, obviously, is monster movies and cryptids and things like that for me. And we have wonderful family home footage of my brother building these wonderful towers and then Kate Zilla coming and knocking them all down.
Oh
Um,
my God, I love
so
that.
definitely a ton of like the Japanese influence,
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of fantasy things. I'm a voracious reader. I love fantasy and I love sci-fi. The Animorphs books were my life growing up. And then obviously D&D, and all that jazz.
I loved D&D. Oh my God, I'm so glad that you brought that up because we didn't do a
I
ton of
I
role playing,
might
but
have
my
a
brother.
problem.
Yes, you do
Ah.
have a problem, and I love you for it. My brother and I used to buy the monster manuals, and even though we had no idea what we were doing, because we were like kind of like too little and like no instruction and like could barely read, but we would like read the monster manuals and like be like, all right, like these are my monsters, as if they
And
were
like,
like
yeah,
Pokemon. Yeah, and
yeah.
it was like I love that stuff, and I never like got into like D&D in a big way, but it's like that's like also a core memory. It's like sitting in like the old game store, right? Like,
Mhm.
and a lot of those aren't around anymore, but like, it was called War and Pieces was our like game shop in town. And it was like puzzles and games and figurines and like Dungeons and Dragons encyclopedias. And I loved all of that stuff. It felt like a store that was like designed for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the series that I was obsessed with as a child was the Spiderwick Chronicles, and it
Hmm.
wasn't until I was older that I realized that the illustrator Tony DiTerlizzi got his start in D&D. And
Oh.
so it's all of this like tying together of I have Tony's beautiful like anthology book of all of his fantasy work. It's called Realms. It's spectacular, and like just flipping through, and I'm like, this is all of my influences all right here. Of
I
just
love
like,
that.
wow, I didn't even realize it until years later.
Hmm.
That's pretty cool. But so like, I guess tailing off of that, are there any other creators that like inspired you, or like any career creators, or just creators in general that like,
Endless
uh,
names.
yeah.
When I was getting started in the comic scene, I was really super inspired by Craig Thompson, the author of Blankets and Habibi.
Oh, yeah,
And
Mm.
both of those books, they're like exploration of sexuality and like defining the difference between who you are and who you desire and why both are okay, and figuring out like that pride a little bit. And though Craig's books don't really explore queer themes per se, it really resonated with me as a young adult. And then, you know, a couple years later, I went, oh, that's why. Craig Thompson was a huge influence on me. There's endless numbers of graphic novel artists, Jen Wang, Faith, Aaron Hicks, obviously Noelle Stevenson, Molly Ostertag. I could go on and on and on. Carrie Peach, the list continues. Not mentioning, you know, all of the massive amount of animators that worked on the things that inspired me so much as a child, and video games and role-playing books. I just there's so much media that I consumed as a child that influenced me in ways that I had no idea until someone sat me down and said, why don't you make a list? And I was like, oh no, this is 12 pages long.
I totally agree. It would take forever to list everything and like how it impacted me, but I think like the main pillars for me, I loved anything by like Miyazaki, and those movies were kind of harder to find when I was also a 90s kid, and we had to go to like the like special art cinema like anytime one of these movies came out. And they also like, you know, they weren't previewed like, you know, other movies were, so you just never knew when one of these movies was going to come out.
It was like a special event,
right? Like it was like, hey, like there's a new like Miyazaki movie, it's in theaters for like one day, grab your coat, put down your homework, we're going. And like those were such like special times. And also just the style of like storytelling. Kind of the best compliment I get on my book sometimes is that people are like, oh, like I can tell like this feels like an anime. This is the way that like the world works, or like the construction, or like the narrative, and or like the way that like magic works in it. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, because like I creatively was reared on a lot of that stuff. And then like Nako Takuchi she's the person who did Sailor Moon.
Yep.
And the original manga, it's behind me, it's up like over here. I have like all of it, and that was like my first like, those are the books that I really like sort of read when growing up. People are always like, oh, like what'd you read growing up? Like, you know, was it Lord of the Rings, what have you? But no, for me it was like the Sailor Moon manga, and it was very queer. I mean, Sailor Moon has like some really iconic queer representation that was unheard of in the 90s. Literally the 5th season of Sailor Moon is about like gender fluid, like trans aliens coming to Earth in like dominatrix outfits. Like you can't make that up. They're literally in thigh-high leather boots for like the entire season, and Sailor Moon falls in love with one of them, knowing full well that they like, you know, go back and forth between male and female. Like, you just didn't have that stuff in like American media. And
but Ryan,
so
they're cousins.
Like,
they're cousins.
Yeah, I know. And like, yeah, Sailor Neptune and Sailor Uranus, like the way like America's issue with like lesbians turned these two sapphic characters into cousins in the US version. It was so uncomfortable.
I remember
and like
even being like little being, I was like, no, yeah. They're not.
Yeah, no, it was like this big, it was the first like, and they were roommates, like trauma of all queer people, right? Like you know, Abe Lincoln and that man that he shared a bed with 20 years. Like it was just so ridiculous. And I remember that. I mean, like, it's such a special thing that like all queer 90s kids like remember tuning into this one like subtextual debate about these two anime characters.
And then suddenly the internet existed, and we all went, you noticed that?
Yeah, it's
well,
like,
Spider-Man pointing.
Right. Yeah, it's great. Like,
what else were they not telling us?
Yeah, like, and if that's not true, like, you can't believe anything. So, I mean, I remember that so clearly. And in terms of books, though, there wasn't a ton of queer representation that I remember really clinging to. So I do remember David Levithan's Boy Meets Boy was like a book that my mom gave me actually for Christmas when I was in like junior high. And that was the first time I read a book about like, you know, queer characters just like doing things, like not, you know, necessarily being persecuted, but like having actual goals and dreams.
Right, that the story isn't about their queerness, they just are who they are.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it's a factor, but it's not like them coming to terms with it. Like they are already gay when the story starts, and like they've got to figure out like other things. And it's super cool because now I'm actually like good friends with David Levithan, and he's publishing me and like my 3rd book. So it's this like very cool like roundabout story where like this like icon that I met and that I really looked up to has now become someone that like, he literally texted me today to be like, hey, like we just had a meeting about your book, like people are really excited. And like that's been a really cool like circle to close in a weird way.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been yeah, it's cool.
It's pretty neat. So speaking of representation, why do you guys think queer representation is important in media? Like, if you had to like sort of say to somebody, if somebody asked you, like, what would you say to that?
I feel like if someone like walked up to me and said, "Why do you think queer representation is important?" I would say, "Because people are queer." That's it.
Yeah, I would
I mean,
probably.
that's
We
true.
need representation.
Facts.
It's if you only have one narrative with no other perspectives, then you have a flawed and biased narrative. So you have to have queer representation to show the whole picture, and to help new generations who are consuming that media find themselves in the media too. Because a lot of the time there's queer subtext, or there's assumptions that queer people can make about characters. Like I brought up Animorphs. I know a lot of the trans community identify with Tobias, but it was never explicitly stated that, Tobias might be trans. So to have a character that's saying, yes, this person is trans, yes, this person is queer, yes, this person is non-binary, and using that terminology gives tools for the generations that are reading them to help identify themselves. And straight community is like, oh, you're trying to turn everyone gay, and it's like, no, we're trying to give you the dialogue and the vocabulary to determine what you are and what you aren't. So if you know what a non-binary person is, you can say, oh, I understand that, I don't identify that way, but now I know what that is. And that, I think, is just as important as helping people find their own identities.
Yeah, I mean, I could not say that better. The thing that like you sort of endure when you don't see yourself in media, like many queer people, there's just no reflection of themselves in the culture around them. And for a young child, what you internalize is not only that you don't belong, but it's that you may not even exist.
Yep.
Right? Like that's something even worse than being told you don't belong here, right? It's that you're completely absent from your own future, which can be a really harsh way to sort of stunt someone's momentum as they develop and figure out who they are and like what they want to do. Because you totally move out of the space of like, make your own dreams come true, and you move into the space of prove that you're a human, which is what so many people have to do every single day. And like the conversations that we end up having with people are that like, please see me as a human. And it's so exhausting to only be able to have that conversation with a broad culture, rather than saying like, hey, and aside from being queer, I actually also have hopes and dreams and things that I would like to achieve. So if you don't see characters doing those things, if other people don't see characters doing those things, then you exhaust all of your energy on just proving that you exist, which is ridiculous. That's the main reason why I only really write stories centering around like queer kids, because I want to, there's such a vacuum of that identity that it feels good to sort of provide. It truly does feel like throwing like people into a void, because there's just so much like to make up for, but it feels good to sort of be part of like turning that around.
I am still here. My headset is beeping at me that it's dying, so I'm going to grab my cable, but I'll be right back.
Oh,
okay.
Speaking
I'll take the next question.
Yeah. Speaking of recharging, do you how do you recharge your creative energies? Like, so like when do you get like burnout or like writer's block?
Yeah. Absolutely. Creativity is like mana, right? Like you can exhaust it and you've got to find sources of it. And it's, for me, the equation is like books don't equal books. When I'm done, when I don't feel like writing my own book, I don't then go pick up other books. I oftentimes find I get the best creative energy from exploring like other mediums. So I've been really into pairing right now. Like if I'm working on something really intense writing wise, I'll go, and when I'm not writing, I'll play video games, or I'll like start like a new show or something like that, or like I'll exercise, something completely departed from the actual task of writing. And I find that gives me a lot of more energy when I sit back down. And also it lets my subconscious sort of work out the things that are giving me trouble. Oftentimes, like the thing that exhausts me is because I'm not confident in what I'm doing, because I'm not sure about like kind of the creative direction that I'm going. And sometimes you can't really force that. It's not a matter of like logic or arithmetic. It's simply a matter of letting your subconscious kind of figure out what you're trying to say about something. So the best way for me to let that work happen is often to kind of put down my work and like sink 4 hours into playing, some video game that I've played 100 times before.
I feel you there.
Yeah. Cait, did you hear the question?
I did.
Okay.
I absolutely agree. I feel like just walking away is maybe one of the stronger things that you can do. And it is so hard to learn that
Hmm.
because you have this pressure and this expectation of yourself that you need to be
Yeah.
working all the time, otherwise, like, what are you doing? But rest is so important. Rest is so important, and it's necessary to turn that brain off and then turn it back on sometimes, especially in what I do, which requires physical repetitive motion.
Yeah.
So there are definitely times, there are days where like my hand starts cramping and I can't even hold a pencil. So I have to, put on my brace and walk away and do something completely different. Because otherwise you end up injuring yourself. And the brain is a muscle. So if you overwork it, you'll injure it. And I agree, video games are a big escape thing for me. I'm a World of Warcraft junkie. And role-playing games, being creative and speaking with my friends is
What a
really
novelty,
important.
talking to other people.
Talking to other people, but it's not as me, it's as my
Yeah, it's
character.
right. Yeah.
Um uh yeah, I
You're not
have that.
gonna keep it running.
Okay.
Um,
And you
Did you
you're gonna mute
okay,
you real quick.
no worries. So yeah, finding ways to just completely put it down and come back to it later is really important, because most of the time when you come back to it, it's not as bad as you thought it was when you left. But
That's
yeah,
true.
that, and then work-life balance, finding the time to take breaks, finding the time to spend time with family or partners is super, super important. And it's a learning curve, I will say, for everyone,
Yes.
especially the self-employed. But it's irreplaceable. It's so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my next question is, do you guys have any thoughts or considerations for other people, like when it comes to like crafting queer characters and storylines? Like any advice? Like you said, like there's not a lot, and this kind of ties into like my other question that I had. Since there isn't like a lot, and there is like sort of that vacuum, how do you sort of avoid doing sort of bad representation or like falling into like stereotypes and stuff like that?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to sort of school people on this because there are such a diversity of experiences that I often don't want to tell someone like, well, the right way to show like a gay person or like a gender fluid person is like, this way, right? Because those identities take many different forms. Many people have many different lived experiences, but what I do tell writers, and I had a workshop with some teen writers last week, and they asked something similar, like, how do you avoid bad representation? We don't want to get canceled on the internet, right? Like, which is a very, very valid thing to want to avoid. But what I told them was like, well, you also don't want to harm people, right? Like,
Right.
that's kind of the impact of poor representation. You can probably in your own life identify instances of representation that you felt like did you a disservice or were perhaps working against you in like your own humanity. And the way that, I mean, I think a lot of people probably need to reorient and think about how to do good with that. And I think a lot of it comes down to talking with people and getting to know the people that you're actually trying to write about, especially if you're writing about something that you're not really intimately familiar with.
Mhm.
Writing your own story can be a really cathartic thing, and no one can really tell you that you're doing a bad job of that because it's ultimately maybe about you. But if you are choosing the somewhat noble task of sort of trying to include a lot of diversity and lived experiences in it, then that comes with a lot of work of exploring what those identities mean, how that identity impacts a story. Something that happens to like the same plot point could happen to like a white queer person and a black queer person, and they're going to go about that very differently depending on what that means in your world, in your story, how that identity intersects with a myriad of other things. And so if you're a fantasy writer like I am, sometimes it comes down to really understanding not just your characters, but also the world and the circumstances and struggles that they live within. All of that goes into, I think, crafting a character that feels not sort of like a cheap shot at diversity points and is instead someone who's like fully realized and ultimately like authentic to the people that you're hoping to write for.
Yeah, I don't know if I can rephrase that a different way and say exactly the same thing. Yeah, I think my biggest contribution to everything that Ryan said is if it's something that you don't know personally and intimately, don't be afraid to ask. Sensitivity workers are there for a reason. Talk to your peers, talk to people around you, talk to communities that maybe you have never thought about before, to get their perspective and do them justice without harming anyone. And then, do the research on what the stereotypes are. And if you're going to embrace a stereotype, do it in a way that isn't harmful. Or if you are like me, do your best to avoid stereotypes like the plague. I feel like stereotypes are so close to the edge of making fun of us, making fun of the community in a harmful way. While at the same time, I do, enjoy poking fun at myself and my peers. It can show a side that a not queer person can use, like that sort of interpretation to then be hurtful. So it's important to make sure that everything you're doing is always reaching up, is punching up, and if you don't know, ask.
Yeah, there's so much safety in like asking and trying to figure that out, and forming people that you trust and that you can reflect off of too. So I mean, even having other writers that you can talk with about and feel safe asking questions of, I think goes a very long way to making sure that you feel comfortable having those dialogues. You'll fumble at first, but it'll be worth it in the end, because your characters and your writing will be a lot stronger for it.
Absolutely. And then don't be afraid to own up to your mistakes. So if you made a mistake, if you generalized someone, if you did something harmful, don't, make it their issue. Don't be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I offended you. It's no, I'm so sorry. This was my mistake. I will learn and do better. And that's all you can ask for.
You guys have any other advice for like aspiring creators?
Do it.
Do it.
Do it. Yes. Write, draw, just do it. There's always going to be that little voice in the back of your head that's, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not good enough. Don't listen to them. You got to start somewhere.
And finish something, for God's sake. Learn how to finish something. My goodness.
The biggest struggle.
It's I know it's hard, but consistently, like when I look around at like my peers, this is gonna sound so like horrible, so please don't judge me. But like the people around me that are writing and illustrating and drawing, like they're great. They're not necessarily the best, most God-given talented people. They're just the people that are in fact doing it. Right. They're the people that are making time and carving out time in their life to actually like commit to this, respect themselves enough to give themselves the courtesy of their best effort, and they're finishing things, right? And they're of course getting better with every project, but there's this fantasy that like the clouds are going to part and God's going to point at you and be like, write a YA fantasy, and like that's just not true. Like if you do feel that calling, like bless you, that's awesome.
How did you do that?
It's just like that's great, but like for most people it's actually a lot more tedious to simply sit down and decide that like I'm gonna sacrifice other things, say no to things so that I can say yes to myself and actually focus on this thing and do it. And that to me is like, there's no secret to that. It's sort of, we all know that that's what it takes, but actually accomplishing that is like a very difficult thing to do, and it looks different for everybody. But Cait said it best. Do it.
Just do it. I want to get it tattooed on my forehead. It says "Finished, not perfect." It's because it's never going to be perfect. You're gonna look at it moments after it goes on the damn shelf and go, oh, no, and there's gonna be mistakes, but that's what gives it character and realness and life. If it was perfect, it'd be boring.
Oh my God, absolutely. I'm with you. Like, this is why I have the end painting in my house, because
I love like, that.
Thank you. Like, it's the most beautiful and terrifying. It's a very sublime sight for a writer to like see the end or like that final page too. So so I look at it every day and I like reckon with like what that actually means. Like, do I want to get there? Am I afraid to get there? Am I stalling because I don't want to see those two words, because then it means it's over and I can't change it? Understanding what it means to finish something is a great skill.
When I was working on my graphic novel, I actually colored the last page before I had started like the final chapter. So it was like, I finished the last page, so I had something to get to rather than I have to keep going and then stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was one of those
Yeah.
like the end is done. The end's done. I get to get to it.
Right. It's like I'm Link and my grappling hook is in the end. I'm just
You're
zipping
getting there.
towards it. Yeah.
Exactly. Like you know where you're
Yeah.
gonna land. It's already there. You don't have to dread the end of the cliff. It's cool. We good.
That's not maybe I'll start every manuscript with putting the end like just below
At the
my
beginning.
cursor. I'm waiting to like hit that. Yeah. Yeah.
That was the main questions that I had. Let me see if like
So did we
our
lose some
guest
folks?
do it.
Did we lose some folks?
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
saw some folks were here and then vanished.
we did. It's possible that they will come back. That we it is David Muir time, so like, so that it's possible. But hey, we got a question. How have you seen your work make a difference for young queer audiences?
Do you want to go first, Ryan, since you actually have things published?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is like such a profound honor to see people impacted by your work. And I mean, you often don't see that though, to be quite real. As like an artist, oftentimes your impact is invisible to you just by the fact that like you are not there watching someone read your book or pick it up or sort of cry in the dead of night because you helped them realize something, right? Like you're not really present for a lot of that stuff. So you can be delusional like I am and just imagine that it's all happening and that you're like God's gift to queer media. But if you are lucky, and I have been lucky, sometimes like people will reach out and just tell you, like they'll just close that distance and tell you like you did an amazing thing for me. I think one of the experiences for me that kind of crystallized this is on Twitter, a lot of would-be novelists are trying to get agents and they'll enter these pitch contests where they'll basically try to pitch their book to like agents so that they get representation and get book deals. And it's a very convoluted process, but the point is that they're trying to get eyes on their work. And to do this, they'll oftentimes kind of shorthand a book's plot and be like, you know, this book is like, you know, it's like Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson meets Breakfast at Tiffany's with like a twist or something like that. And I'll never
I'd read
forget
that.
like that. Right? That sounds great.
Yeah.
I found my agent this way. So like my agent Veronica like found me because I was tweeting and I think mine was like Inception meets like RuPaul's Drag Race for Reverie. And that
That's
like,
amazing.
thank you. It has nothing to like neither. I mean, Inception sort of, but RuPaul's Drag Race. I was like, if someone knows what RuPaul's Drag Race is, they'll be queer enough to understand like how this book like works. So has nothing to do with like a game show, but it does have to do with the drag queen. But then I'll never forget like a few years later, the same like contest came around and people were using my book as like an example
That's
of like
amazing. Oh,
right,
the
of,
dream.
like,
Oh, the dream.
right, like here's a queer book that like did really well and that people know and they recognize it. And so my book became shorthand for like a queer fantasy success and was then used, you know, sort of leveraged by queer creators to get their own stuff off the ground, which is all I've ever wanted. I only want people to be able to kind of create on their own terms and make their own stuff that they're proud of and get to tell their own stories. And so being able to be a part of that has been really cool. And I've gotten to see it in a few different ways, but that specifically stands out.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
it's cool. It was really cool.
Yeah, for me personally, obviously my book is not out yet, but I'm very excited about it. But before that, it was a webcomic for a while, and getting feedback from commentary or like on Tumblr or Twitter was really encouraging that people identified with the characters and identified with us, the creators, because my partner and I are both pretty openly queer, and so being queer creators creating things that are like having success, I think is also important, not just seeing
Yeah.
themselves in your work, seeing themselves in you, because that was really important to me growing up, that learning, oh, that comic creator that I like is gay, what, like that's so cool, and then as more and more content creators like in current media are coming out or being open or introducing themes that I would have loved to see as a kid, like Steven Universe and She-Ra and Kipo, just all of these unbelievable forms of media that I'm seeing now. And I'm like, yes, because our book explores some of those themes as well, and to state them explicitly and to have that kind of resource for young people, I'm just excited more than anything else. I'm
Yeah.
like, I really hope that young people see this and think, oh, that could be me, or that's something I want to learn about. That could be my friends, the community of it too. And having a character, we have a character come out as non-binary in the middle of our book. And their best friend goes, I'm still your best friend. And they're like, you're not mad at me? And it's like, why would you be mad? This is who you are. You're still my best friend. And to have that moment, I think will be really, really important for the people who identify with my character, but didn't have that from their community. And to see that's possible is really important. I don't know. I hope that one day someone does their elevator pitch using another kind as a reference.
They
That
will.
would be
They
amazing.
will. You have so much cool stuff ahead of you. And
Thank you.
one thing I like about your answer and just in general about the community is that like there doesn't seem to sort of be that like Highlander attitude about being a queer creator. Like there can only be one. I think it used to be that like publishers would be like, well, we already got our queer book, but we've sort of gotten past that point now. And like now it's like I feel like there's so much room at the top, right? Like to be able to reach back down and pull someone up with you is the whole point.
Joy of it.
That's the joy of it, right? I totally agree. And yeah, I mean, like you're already doing this, and like as soon as you're published, like that's gonna happen for you. I just know it, and it's like very monumental work that you do. So I'm so excited. I'm excited for you.
Thank you. No, we're thrilled. I'm still like, oh my God, it's coming out in 2 months. It's 2 months. Yeah, it's been done since May, but it's one of those like it's coming out. So very excited.
So soon.
Do you want to go in a little bit about how you got yours published, Cait May? If you don't
sure.
mind. Yeah, I'm a little curious.
Yeah, I actually so like I said, we had a webcomic, and it was weekly, updating on most weeks because I was working full-time at the time. But we had the story planned out pretty extensively. We knew what themes we wanted to explore, and we were updating a page a week. And we were doing the webcomic, I think, for about 2.5 years. I know we had reached over 100 pages, which is a lot. We had issues printed that we self-published issues, so chapter by chapter of the webcomic. And my full-time job in the before times was doing conventions, like anime and comic conventions, which I would really like to come back, but I want everyone to be safe.
Someday.
Yeah, we're supposed to be going
soon.
to Gen Con next month, but fingers crossed, we'll see how everything shapes out. But we were bringing these issues to conventions, and I had postcards, and we were promoting, free webcomic, or you can buy the issues. Here's what it's about. Let's talk about it. And we were at FlameCon, which is New York's queer Comic Con, which is the best convention. It is so much fun. We were there, we were selling, we were, talking about people, and this person came up and said, what is this? And we said, oh, this is, it was titled Irregular at the time. And we said, this is Irregular. This is our webcomic. It's about, kids escaping persecution and figuring out a found family. And they said, well, what do you want to do with it? Which was not a question I had ever gotten before. And I was like, well, why? Are you like a publisher?
Yeah,
and they
what
said,
do you want to do with it?
They said, well, I'm an agent. And I said, oh, hi, nice to meet you. And then that is our agent, Claire. That's how we met them. We talked with them via email, and within a month they had signed us on, and we started pitching, which was just bananas, and this moment of serendipity that I don't want to say it was all luck, because I had worked really, really hard at getting myself through the con circuit and advertising and obviously making the comic on its own. But it did end up being a lot of work, ended up bringing all of the circumstances together to make my own luck. And Claire has been absolutely amazing. We are signed on with Harper Alley, which is the graphic novel imprint of HarperCollins. And it's been really amazing because my partner is non-binary, our agent is non-binary, and our editor is non-binary. And we're working
Nice.
on this very queer book with this very queer team. And it's been such a joy. It was one of those moments of like, oh my goodness, these are the right people to be making this book with. It's not like we had to fight to get the book made. They're just as excited as we are. And it's been such a joy. It's been so much fun. Long
That's
process
amazing.
though. We pitched for about 1.5 years before we got an offer. And the entirety of production for the book was about 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Thank you.
Ryan, I know you are working on your third book, or like, can you tell us a little about that, or
Yeah, I'd
what are
love
you
to.
allowed to tell us about that?
So what am I allowed to say?
Give us that elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't think anything, nothing is secret at this point. I think most of it's been announced. Okay, so my third book is called The Honeys, and it's not fantasy like my first, it's not a rom-com like my second, it's actually a horror novel. It's a like YA supernatural horror. And the book is about this young gender fluid teen named Mars, who wakes up one night and his sister, his twin sister, is trying to bludgeon his head in, which is really weird. A, because murder, and B, because she's supposed to be at summer camp. Like, what is his sister Caroline doing home from summer camp? She wasn't in the house when he went to bed. Now she's here. In the ensuing struggle, he actually kills her by accident, and is sort of just left with this mystery of like, how did this situation happen? She's supposed to be at summer camp, and Mars had previously gone to summer camp with Caroline, but he left because summer camps are really binary places. There's boys camps and girls camps, and they separate you by gender all the time, and it became too uncomfortable. So Mars left his sister behind. It sort of left her in the sights of the popular girls at camp that called themselves the Honeys, and they called themselves that because they maintain the sort of mysterious beehive behind their cabin, and they're beautiful and terrifying and like everything Mars as a gender fluid kid like aspired to be, but his sister always hated them until she became one, and then she went crazy, and then she tried to kill him. And so the book starts, that's chapter 1, and Mars decides to attend the camp and sort of suffer the binary of like America's heritage traditions, and figure out exactly what is the connection between his sister, like the madness that overtook her, and these beautiful, terrifying girls that seem to worship these bees that the camp has been maintaining for hundreds of years. And so that book's called The Honeys. The thing that if anyone's wondering, the thing that I'm holding, that I keep playing with, this is a beekeeper's tool. It's used to like open up beehives. Kind of looks like a murder weapon, doesn't it? I've done a lot of beekeeping attendance in my research for the book. But yeah, I'm super excited about it. I just pitched it at the Scholastic. It's going to be up with Scholastics next summer, and we just had like our big sales conference, and Scholastic, which like is a huge press, like they're super excited about it, which is like, it's just really cool to like watch that kind of power maneuver around a book about like a gender fluid teen fighting like a beekeeping cult. It's cool.
That sounds spectacular, and I can't wait to read it. Sounds
Yeah.
terrifying
I'm so
too.
excited.
There's
Thank you.
something innately horrifying about like that queen bee clique of girls, and so to take that and to like kind of go old god Z with it is spectacular. I'm very excited.
I love it. I love nothing. I mean, I describe it as sort of like Heathers meets Midsummer, right? Like it's sort of the vibe of like beautiful, bucolic, sunny, gorgeous summer camp, plus like the dynamics of like popular sadistic girls. And if you're worried that it sort of falls on tropes that are anti-feminist, I would say read the book and let me know if you think that by the end of it, because you don't know who's good or who's bad until kind of right towards the end.
It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited about it.
So do we have any other questions in the chat, or?
Y'all think of questions after, or if you're a person in the future viewing this on YouTube, Cait, I don't know about you, but I'm like all over social media, so y'all should feel free to follow us, and you can always ask us. I feel like we're probably both the type that will do our best to
Absolutely.
answer stuff if you think of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
send a
definitely.
message, tweet at us, hit us up on Instagram.
Yeah. All of the above.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I will definitely make sure to like include like your social media tags in the description so people can like find you guys and follow you. Because I definitely follow both of you already. So I am very, very fond of your TikTok, Ryan.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I love TikTok. It's like thing that I have a deadline coming up, but after that, I'm like, I'm gonna get TikTok famous. Like that's like my goal for the fall. We just have to get amorphous goal, but I'm just like, I want to do that. I want to have that.
I love TikTok. I love watching TikToks. I still have not figured out how to make them. It is all good.
Yeah,
I'll
no,
get
me
there
neither.
eventually.
But yeah, definitely. I do appreciate you guys taking some time out and coming and chatting with me and answering some questions. And definitely, when this goes up, I will definitely share it with you guys. And hopefully, the people out there enjoyed this as much as I did. So yeah, thank you guys for coming. And
thank you for having us. This was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. This was wonderful.
Yeah.
Be happy to do this again in future.
Cool,
of
yeah,
course.
definitely.
Oh, me
definitely.
too. Love talking about nerdy gay stuff. It's like
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is the best. Like maybe someday we'll just do like a chat about that season 5 of Sailor Moon because like I do have lots of Sailor Moon thoughts.
I've got the thigh high leather boots right over there. So you let me know. Give me some notice and I will zip them on.
Oh my gosh, just queer nerd talk, like not about themes or anything, just talking about nerdy stuff. I'm down.
I badly want to sit down and just discuss the homoerotic nature of Dragon Ball Z. That's all I want to do. I need to have a whole conversation about the traditional masculine worship that show is, and that doesn't have to be right now, but what I'm saying is that like all I want to do is talk about the queer themes in like all old school anime because it's all there.
I would go to that panel.
Yeah, it'd be good. It'd be
Yeah,
maybe we should do that at FlameCon. We should let FlameCon know once they're back in action because I'm
going to be on a panel with the virtual FlameCon this year about fantasy world building. But cool. Let's do queer themes in anime, please.
I would love that.
Yeah, if you do it, I will be there. So like I definitely I am so excited to like go to FlameCon next time they have it. Like I heard about it last year and I was like,
if you live on the East Coast, if you can get to New York City, it is such a joy. It is a tiny, tiny venue. So be prepared to be packed in like, little gay sardines. But it's worth it. And the amount of creators that assemble at that con is insane. FlameCon does an amazing job of cramming as many creatives into the space as they possibly can.
I've always wanted to go. I moved to New York so that I could have access to things like this, and then
it's so much fun. And then the world ended. Yeah, sorry.
Right. Yeah. So I'm like, great. But I'm like sticking it out. I'm staying put because I know these things will come back, and I cannot wait to attend them and see everybody in person.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and hope you guys have a good evening.
You as well.
And thank you guys for watching this in the future and our guests in the present. So yeah.
Bye, future.
Bye.
Yeah. Hello, future. Hope things are doing
goodbye.
better. Yeah.
Yeah, please let things be better.